Appreciate you, everybody being here. I know it's late. Let me start with, this is really our first recruiting class. Last year was after the signing day, and so it was a completely different situation, procedure, and process, and so forth. So this was, really a very long process that I'll get into in a minute, but it was much different from last year. So let me just start with that. It's a big class, and we're excited about the players that have signed here and committed here. They will be a foundation for our program. They represent really the values that we stand for. At least that's what we, the way we feel at this time. That's why we recruited those players. And it really transcends, the entire football team. We signed one quarterback, one running back, but other positions, receiver, tight end, offensive, defensive line, linebacker, defensive back, a kicker and a punter. It's a pretty balanced class. We have guys across the board in most every position, and we feel good about the players that we have here, and we're glad they feel good about us. So it's it's a good day. It's been a very long day. We started at 7 a.m. We talked to every player, and I will say, I think all cases, there was family or friends or coaches or somebody with the player when we talked to them and welcomed them to our football team program. And we had other follow-up conversations with people that were connected to them, coaches, mentors, family members, and so forth. Just kind of continue to work on the relationship and the process. These players and their parents, a lot of this is again about relationships, about trust, and about families trusting us with their kids and their development and their career. And we take that very seriously and want to make sure that we have clear lines of communication and transparency with all the things that are involved on that. And so today was a day to follow up on many things that have been done over the past, let's call it period of time, which could be weeks, months, or in some cases actually years, that some of these players have been recruited by somebody here in North Carolina. So when you look at the culmination of today and the months and months of work that was put into this recruiting class by so many people in building the relationships, it's a 365-day-a-year job. When you look at it collectively, not each person, I'm not saying that, but collectively, we have student athletes on this campus. I don't know how many days a year it is, but it's a lot. And we've gone out and they've come in and they visited, and other players have been here for camps and 7-on-7s and games and tours and so forth and so on. And there's a multitude of relationships on many different levels. And it's really, all hands on deck. Everybody's involved, and there are multiple people to talk to, boxes to check, things to, questions to answer, to try to make sure that everything is the right fit all the way around, that the student athlete is getting what he's looking for, and that we're getting the student athlete that we feel is right for our program, and that we can make that work. So I think it's important for me to recognize all the people that this involves, starting at the top, Chancellor Roberts, who has come over and talked to our recruits and been around at times when they've been, he's been around when they've been around, some of that's been, it's just happened generically. Some of it has been structured. Lee and Steve on the, athletic department side. And then the people who are the most hands-on, the people in the recruiting department, Mike and his staff, assistant coaches, and personnel people, and then all the other people that are involved in this process, from admissions to academics to medical to operations, travel and so forth, food and entertainment and logistics and moving people around in various events. It would be games or, again, tours, things like that, PR and content, a lot of the social media type things that are involved in recruiting with both the school, the student athletes, high school, and so forth. That gets into another level of management. Our alumni have been very helpful and supportive, and we've engaged many of them in this final process with welcoming our student athletes to the university, the Rams Club, and other coaches at UNC and other sports where players, student athletes have overlapped into other sports, or maybe they have a sibling who's in another sport, or that kind of thing, where it's not just straight football, but it's also other aspects of the university that come into play. And again, some of the help we've gotten from professors and again, people in academics to help student athletes find their right, whether it's a course of study or particular questions that they have about the academic side of their experience here at this university. So again, I just want to emphasize what a comprehensive undertaking this is. It's a very lengthy one and a very serious one. When a student athlete commits 4 years to an institution to not only have his football career and his academic career, and it's a big life decision, and we take that very seriously and want to do the best that we can to make sure that every question is answered honestly and with integrity, so that there aren't any false hopes, false expectations, or misconceptions about anything. But again, going back to the football side of it, very excited about the players that we have, and the student athletes that are coming in here. Most, but not all, most of them will be here in January, which will give them more time to train and develop in our program for the fall. But that's not a deal breaker one way or another. I mean, we're excited to get the players whenever they get here. I'm just saying a lot of them will be here early. And they all have, generally, I think, started to form a connection themselves as a recruiting class, as they've come to various games and various events around here where they've met other student athletes who are making the same decision as they are to come here, and they've already started to, form, a bond with this, with their recruiting class. So it's exciting to see that too, and I know in team building, when people of similar mindset and similar values and would come together, then they usually, that usually provides a good, good basis and a good start for, long-term relationships. So hopefully we can, we can do that and be a part of that process. So I'll turn it over to Michael at this point, and he has the most intimate knowledge of all the players and all their backgrounds, and whether it be playing or family and so forth. That's he oversees all that and has worked extremely hard at it. Again, I can't even begin to. It's hard to me to even comprehend the number of man and woman hours that have been put into evaluating, communicating, and hosting and building relationships with not just these players, but student athletes, but many other student athletes who have made different choices. But with the ones that we have, it's been it's a pretty major undertaking. So Mike's the best person to talk about that. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nick.
Got it.
First of all, before we start talking about the recruiting class, I on behalf of all of us in the organization, we are extremely proud and excited about Coach Belichick going into the Hall of Fame and being being a coaching nomination for the Hall of Fame. I mean, what he's accomplished in the NFL goes unparalleled by anyone. The most wins of any coach, when you count his 31 playoff wins to go along with 328 wins during the regular season, it's an honor deserving. And for me, it's really, as a friend of his and as someone who's worked with him and was a part of his first win at Foxborough Stadium, or they called it Schaefer Stadium at that time, when we beat the Patriots, to his 328th win and his last win. It's been a remarkable career that's going to continue here at North Carolina, but I think to me, you could see the brilliance of him at a young age, and today, as we have gotten older and grayer and fatter, he's still the same coach, and that's what makes me so excited about what the future here at North Carolina is. And today's about the future. Today's about what we're trying to accomplish, the players that we brought in, the players that represent what we want to bring to North Carolina. I think in our first year, we learned a lot about the university, we learned a lot about the ACC, we learned a lot about college football, but we learned a lot about what matters in terms of how to recruit. Recruiting is about, like scouting, is about finding what you want. And I think this class represents, our first class represents about finding what we want. And that goes along with the Hall of Fame coach to be able to develop the talents from within. So really, today's a great day for all the recruits, but it's a great day for me personally and for us as an organization to know that Coach Belichick is headed to Canton and going to get one of those special yellow jackets or gold jackets. I'm not sure what color they are. So anyway, I wanted to start that off. As far as the recruiting class, look, it's, as Coach said, it's robust, it's big. It wasn't intended always to be that way, but I think what a lot of things have happened during the course of the season, with coaching changes, which opened up a lot of players to come available, it afforded us an opportunity to capitalize on that and build a roster. And this is the first real time that Coach and our whole staff have been able to build a roster in a manner in which we see it fit. The other thing I think it's really important is different than the NFL. This recruiting requires a multitude of people. And I couldn't begin to thank everybody in our department in scouting, the women that help us in recruiting, the guys who do the scouting, the coaches who do effort. I mean, this recruiting is different than the NFL. It's 24/7 all the time. The NFL, once the draft's over, everybody kind of hightails it out and starts waiting until August comes around. This is like 24/7 all the time. So it was really remarkable to watch the people work and the relationships that people within our building develop with the players. It's not just necessarily coach's time. It's not necessarily the assistant coach's time. It's everybody's time. And I couldn't begin to thank everybody enough. It's been a huge part, from our strength department, nutrition, the training staff, the scouting staff, everybody. It's really been remarkable, and I want to thank them. So today's about everybody in this organization. It's not about I found a guy, or I like a guy, or we got this guy. It's about the organization bringing talent to it, and it's everybody's doing it. It's not me or coach, it's everyone. So I think that's really important to talk about. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
We'll get started with questions. Brian, go ahead.
Hey Michael, how you doing?
I'm good.
How difficult was this process when the transfer portal hasn't even opened, so you're not even sure which guys are still going to be on your roster? So how do you build a recruiting class like that? And then when it comes to the money, the revenue share, and dealing with over the cap limits that other teams are already talking about, how do you juggle all that as you're putting together such a big class?
Well, I think we're in a same, you know, the National Football League's the same. Every year is a new year for the National Football League. I think we're accustomed to it, frankly. You know, we now have to answer two questions. You have a scholarship and you have a revenue share contract, and you have to negotiate the revenue share contract. And so value becomes important. I think what we'll do is, as I've said before, we're in the process of evaluating every player on our team. We're going to have meetings with every player on our team, and those meetings are going to end up with us deciding on what direction the player wants to go and what direction we want to go. It's a mutual thing. I think there's a great saying I used to have behind me when I worked for the Raiders. It said, if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less, by Eric Shinitzky of the United States Army. And this is the world we live in. Change is a part of it. And it may cause you guys to panic about 4 players leaving the team. That's not something that's going to make us panic, because we've lived in that world our whole lives. And so you have to find players that fit your system and move on, and every year's a new year. The best thing about this year is that on January the 17th, the portal will close, and you'll be able to build your team, knowing that when you go to spring ball, that is your team. Knowing that when you go through your off-season program, that is your team. Knowing that the development, a lot of the players that played for us this year didn't get here until the summertime. And so their progress wasn't really at the highest level until mid-season. So for us, the strength of Coach Belichick's program is in player development. And that player development is hard when you practiced all spring with a team that wasn't involved in the fall.
Front left, good.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you as well, kind of going off that a little bit about, portal and numbers and everything like that. Certainly guys will, kind of meet with you guys, have decisions to make about, staying or going. But, regardless, this is a big class. How, I guess, game ready do you guys see this class as being, as far as, when week 1 comes around, how, I guess, much of a contribution do you kind of see this group making?
Well, the player controls whether they're game ready or not, and I think our job is to get them to that point. But I think the reality is, if you're here in January, which the bulk of this class will be here in January, then we'll have a lot of time to develop their bodies, to develop their minds, to develop their football techniques, to be ready to help us in some capacity. I think we saw, in Damon June's ability to come in and play as a freshman. And when we first got here, nobody really knew what he was capable of doing, but I think he came in and worked hard and did the things. So Jalen McGill came in and started to play. And so there are examples of young players that have developed within the system. So I think one of the things we have to do is spend time developing talent, and it's based on the players' dedication to their craft, dedication to their off season, to see if they can find the play time. We have no rule, and never had a rule, about who we play. Everybody, the best players are going to play, regardless of where they come from. Malcolm Butler was an undrafted player. Devin McCourty was a first-round pick. It really didn't matter who was going to play. Their best players were going to play.
On the right, Michael.
Hey there, Michael. You mentioned how big this class is. Is there, a trait or a couple of traits that you found in each one of these guys that you saw and you said, that's a Carolina football player, that's a guy we want to pursue?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think, to me, traits are so important in drafting and in scouting. And I think multi-sport players in this era of one sport guys is really important. I think, there's so many of players that had played corner but played running back, played, wide receiver and defensive back. So I think the players, and some of them were forced to, because their teams were so small. They had 23 guys on their team. You got to play both ways. But I think the playing both ways and playing multiple sports is important. We're in a generation where the kids are now, I wasn't a good enough athlete, but I tried to play football, I tried to play basketball, I tried to play baseball. I tried to play all 3 sports. I thought I couldn't play any. These kids mostly focus on just one sport, and I think it kind of diminishes their skill set in other areas. And I think those multi-sport players, whether it's track, whether it's basketball, are something that really appeals to us because it shows their versatility and their dedication. Now, some kids can play basketball, but they're coming out early, so they don't choose to stay on the basketball team, right? And we have a lot of guys like that. But we're looking for multi-sport players that can play 2 different positions, and we can utilize their skill set.
Mike, when you have 39 guys coming in, and you don't know how many guys are leaving, when will that start to take effect in terms of the number of players you're gonna have to start working with when you start?
I think it's a mindset of being adaptable to change, right? I don't look at it as, oh, how many guys are leaving. I think a lot of it is you have to grade your team after a season, and you have to value the player that you have on your team to a certain level. And that value tells the player what the revenue is going to be. And, you know, just because a player stays doesn't mean he's really helping the team, right? You know, if a guy's not good enough and he stays, does that really help you? You know, and so you have to look at it that way. For you guys, it's say, well, they've lost 20 guys. Well, maybe 20 guys weren't good enough to play here. Or maybe we don't want to lose. So I think a little bit goes both ways. So the change that occurs is something that we have to be very adaptable to. And knowing that we have time. I mean, last year, you know, we got here in December, the portal had already been gone. Last year we got here, the high school recruiting class was closed when we got here. So we were kind of operating on the fly. Again, no excuses. But I think this year we have a better understanding of what's in the portal, what could be in the portal, should I say, what kind of players we want from the portal that fit what we have to do here at North Carolina. And so we have to be ready to be able to fill the spots that we have to. And that's why it's really important to have a grading system, to have a personnel department, so that we can sit there and honestly say, okay, you know, we grade this player a 59 who's on our team, we need to get a better player, we need to get a 63. That's how you build a team. You don't build a team by just grabbing a guy here and there and a guy leaves, a guy goes. It's systematic, you know. We need a right tackle, let's say, you know, I'm using that as an example. Well, we need a right tackle because our right tackle maybe is a 57. If he stays on the team, he stays on the team, but we need a better right tackle. And so that's kind of where we look at it. And so for us and Coach Belichick and myself, I mean, we're used to a lot of change. You know, now we're only used to 53 players, so it's a little bit changed, but we always had a roster of 90 going to camp. So you get used to it.
Can I follow up one more? Can you explain to me or us, revenue share is a set amount of money that you get, obviously, from the university. It's not like that in the NFL where you have free agents come in and there's a lot more money involved. Can you or do you have rev share conversations with some of the players as you're recruiting? Do they ask about the money at that time? Or how does
Well, we're in a professional era. Let's make no mistake about it. We're in a professional era. I mean, that's just part of college football. I mean, anybody who would stand in front of you would tell you it's not. I mean, it's, you know, I mean, I think you can argue the order, but what's your academic curriculum and then what's your NIL situation are two questions that got to get answered. Now, maybe the second one goes first. The first one, you do more than academics, but we're in a professional era. And so that's why you need a grading system. And that's why you need to be able to value talent so that you understand what you're paying for.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
the difference is that you signing guys in the NFL who are either proven college players or established value from other NFL teams. So when you're talking rev share with these kids, you're really not sure how much they're going to develop. So that must be I mean,
I think,
how do you spend
well,
your
if
money?
you're talking about the portal, you obviously can watch a young guy play, or, you know, whether he's playing in the MAC or whether he's playing in the Big Ten, you can watch him. And then the high school kids, you know, I mean, I think if you watched Jerry Rice play in high school, you probably would have said, man, he's a really good player. You know, there's certain guys that kind of stand out to you. I mean, that's what we get paid to do. I mean, we get paid to make an opinion, and we've got to be right more than we're wrong. And that's part of the job that you do. And so there's going to be some guys you're going to take chances on that don't work out. And there's going to be some guys you don't think you should take that you do that really work out. So it's the same thing in the draft. I mean, look, I mean, let's bring up Jerry Rice. We're sitting in the first round, and he was the third choice for us. That worked out pretty good.
Back right, Pat.
Mike, Alex over here right now. You got Burgess coming in from the quarterback position. You got several quarterbacks on the roster right now that can come back, including Gio. So how do you kind of see the quarterback position working out on the whole? Like, you see everybody coming back, looking to bring in somebody else from the portal.
Well, I think we're going to go through that, Pat. I think we're gonna spend a lot of time on every position and evaluate every position correctly, and then understand where we need to go forward. And certainly Travis Burgess, you know, obviously he missed most of his senior season with his injury, so that has to play into account. So we're gonna make decisions what we think is the best interest of our program moving forward, based on the total realm of what we think is needed for our team. So, and we don't really know what is going to happen tomorrow, because the portal doesn't open up until January.
You mentioned the rating scale you had for players. You know, guys at 63, guys at 57. So when you have those numbers, it's like analytically give you an idea of what you expect the win total to be, and what do you kind of take away from maybe your analysis last year of those players that you had versus the results that you got, and maybe how you tweak that model?
I'm not sure I follow your question, Pat. I don't know. I don't run an analytical model on signing players as it relates to wins. I think there's a place in analytics, right? But, you know, I'm not sure analytics ever tell you that, you know, I mean, ESPN has yet to tell you to punt the ball. ESPN has yet to tell you to kick the field goal, right? They've yet to tell you that. Now, they don't tell you who's on the other team, right? So I think you know, using the word analytics doesn't make you smarter. It just, you have to apply what you're trying to accomplish. I think when you don't win games, you learn a lot. When you win games, you learn a lot. And so I think that's part of the equation.
I guess I'll take on the word analytics then. Like, just, you brought in the team last year. I'm sure you hope they would do better than go 4-8. So kind of, what do you take away from where you look, what do you learn from that evaluation process going forward?
I think, you know, whether we were 4-8 or 8-4, you take the same thing away. You take, where do you have to improve your football team? I think, to me, if you're just focused on the record, which obviously you are, you just look at the record and say, this guy, but you have to look at player development, you have to look at who was injured, you have to look at the situation that goes into it, which is something that's what we get paid to do. You know, it's easy to look at the scoreboard, but there's a lot more that goes into what happened during the season that you have to fix. And I think that's something we'll take into account.
Front left. Okay.
Yeah.
Shelby, you go next.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
It doesn't matter.
I guess just
We'll
kind of
get them
building
both.
off of
It doesn't matter.
that.
I'm sure Pat will have another one there.
Rock, paper, scissors for it. No, I guess, just, I was speaking to, Burgess literally on the way over here, and he was speaking about how, I think this recruiting class is coming in with a lot of confidence and really kind of the mentality of like, we can, you know, be the change makers for this program. I'm curious how you guys have approached, maybe from a messaging standpoint, just speaking to the recruits again, obviously 4-8, maybe not the way that you guys want things to go, but it seems like this new class is really fired up. I'm just curious, what is the messaging been?
Well, I think this class is amazing. I mean, for all the negative stories and inaccurate stories that were written, this class ignored them and knew it was noise and rallied together and came to almost every home game and didn't really let the inaccuracies bother them, because they were in our building and they understood what was going on in our building, and they understood what Coach Belichick was doing, and they had meetings with Coach Belichick, and they knew what Coach Belichick's coaching was like. You know, there's a lot of people that pretend to be experts that have no idea. And so the people that I really respect about this class are the kids that came in here that really said, we know what's going on in that building. We understand what's going on. Nobody's going to deter us from leaving. Now, look, let's be clear. Everybody that you recruit against used it against you. You know, and it didn't bother them. And they had conviction of their heart because they saw it with their own eyes. The stories never matched.
Far left, front row.
In case you may heard this at Carolina, two quick things. The first is, do you have a number on the amount of people that are early enrollees, or any idea on that number?
You know, I think we're 39 guys, the 40,
That's right.
Emily, what are we?
39.
We just have 3 guys that won't be here, believe it or not, which is really remarkable. And it's great, and it's a tribute to the kids who prepare themselves to get out early. You know, it's just not something you just say, hey, I want to come out early. You got to take certain classes and you got to do all that.
Yeah, and then real quick, you mentioned the difference in NFL scouting versus this process is 24/7 throughout the year. How was that process for you, and how long did it take for you to kind of formulate maybe what was what worked for you? How much did you enjoy that process? Kind of that situation.
Well, I really enjoy what I do for a living, so I mean, I'm blessed to do it. I mean, to be able to scout, to be able to watch football all day long, I mean, I've had a lucky life. And so I know that, and I'm grateful for it. The difference this year from last year was when we got here, we didn't really have time to put in a system. You know, we were operating, do you like that guy, do you like that guy? We were operating in a vacuum that we didn't really exist in. We were just trying to catch up. And I think by the time we got to the summer portal, by the time we got to summertime, we were able to build a scouting manual. We were able to build a grading system that's conducive to North Carolina. We were able to build some instruments, the toolbox that will allow us to go out and scout. And so now we have a system that's up and running. And so, you know, we spent time training 25 college students on how to make tapes. You know, like we spent time, every scout has 5 college students that come in here every single day, and we don't just tell them to go make a tape. They come in and we teach them what we're looking for on a highlight, on a profile tape, and then they make them. And that took 2 months to teach those kids how to do it. And they're remarkable. They really are. They get it, they're learning. And some of them are, you know, all different majors. You know, we have girls that come in and do it, and they do a great job. So to get the system in place is more than just turning a light switch on. And unfortunately, when we first got here, I'm not making any excuses, but when we first got here, we didn't have time to turn a light switch on. We had to just get into the dark room.
Front row on the right.
Michael, Riken Fuller, Tar Heel 24/7. You made the sort of comparison earlier to seeing like when someone sees a Jerry Rice in high school, and I'm not saying any of these guys are that Jerry Rice level, but when you are sort of evaluating these players and now you're evaluating them from a position where you have to sort of shape raw talent a lot more than in the NFL. When you sort of evaluate these guys, is that something that you prioritize, is finding these guys with just a lot of raw ability over just maybe how they fit into your system?
I think one of the words someone used is traits, right? There's certain traits in each position that you want. Now, most people think receiver is all about speed. Most people think receiver is all about, you know, how fast can you run the 40-time or defensive back, when receiver position is really about balance and eye-hand coordination and the ability to accelerate out of in and out of your cuts. That doesn't always translate to being the fastest guy on the team. So there's certain traits you look for in each position. And the hardest thing about high school football is the level of competition, because, you know, I mean, you see how big some of our guys are, and they're playing against guys that look like me, you know, and so they're going to dominate that, right? And you have to be able to use that. But the same problem in same problem in college football when you're scouting. You know, when I worked for Al Davis, he wouldn't watch anything but the Senior Bowl, because the Senior Bowl was good players against good players all the time. And he didn't really want to watch a guy play, you know, guy at Michigan play against some guy at Oregon Tech. He wasn't interested in that. So we have to go through that and do all that. But I think, you know, you can see the traits that are required in the position that you're looking for, and then within the system. You know, you lay your system down, and then in that system, you need players that fit the skill set within the system, and then you go find those guys. So, and that's what makes it harder for you guys. You're a recruiting service, so you're watching the players, but you're scouting outside in, not inside out. You're scouting the player, and you say, I like this guy, you know, or I don't like the guy, because you're trying to scout for a bunch of different teams. Football is way different than baseball. You can play third base for the Mets and get traded to the Yankees and play the second half of the doubleheader, right? It don't matter. You play, right? In football, if you play for Kyle Shanahan in the offensive line and you get traded to another team that doesn't do that, you're not going to play for a while. So there's a lot of different things that go on into football that aren't always accounted for when you're scouting. That doesn't mean you're wrong with your evaluations. That just means it's harder for you than it is for me, because I know what we're looking for and you don't, because you're not involved in the program. So it's become a little bit different.
Front on the left.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious, going back to, I think what Art was asking about rev share and just kind of negotiations with maybe this incoming class. Obviously you're having those conversations with the kids that are coming in. You also are going to have conversations with certain players that you want to retain, and then going into the portal, you know, there's multiple parts to it. How are you guys, I guess, maybe like allocating kind of the rev share, if that makes sense? Like, how do you go about
Production.
Yeah.
It's all about based on production. It's based on winning and production, right? So, I mean, if you produce and you're at a top level, there's everybody's working off the same relative numbers, you know? And so it's a lot easier to do it when you base everything based on production. And the other thing you have to do is you have to have a salary cap that has integrity within your own team. And so your best player has to make the most money, say taking the quarterback out of it because they usually make the most, but your best player has, and then your second best player, and you work your way down. But if your 20th player is making X and your second best player is making Y and it's less than that, you got a problem on your team, you got a problem in your locker room. You know, that's what free agency has done to a lot of teams, is because you sign a guy from outside and you bring him in. Coach at New England, you know, I mean, I think Julian Edelman must have gotten 20 raises every time they brought a receiver in. He would get a new contract because the receiver they brought in was making a little bit more than Julian, and Julian got a new contract, or Rob, or anybody. That's how you have to handle it. You have to be respectful to the players you have on your team, but you also have to improve your team. So there's a structure within that, and it's all based, it's a production-based business. It's a production-based business now. I mean, it's college, but it's still a production-based business.
Stay in the front left.
Yeah, when it comes to obviously, you know, again, the big class, Belichick was saying it's a foundation, you know, kind of setting the foundation for the role. How does that impact, I guess, the role of the portal for you guys? Like, is it for complementary guys? Is it looking for kind of the stars? Like, you know, how does that impact the role of the portal?
Well, I mean, it goes back to, you know, there's two things you need, right? So anytime the season's over, and this is what we're working on now, you put together your team needs list, okay? And your team needs list is pretty much, you know, this is an old Bill Parcells thing. You have for us to compete at the highest level, we must have this. And then the second category is you want this, and then you need, the third category is you need this. That's players that, you know, you'd like to improve, but you have a player there. And then those three categories, you have to fill in the blanks. Because remember, we're in the veterinarian business. The football team doesn't talk to you. You know, when you bring your dog to the vet, the dog doesn't say, oh, my right heel bothers me, right? And so the vet has to figure out what's wrong with the dog, right? It's the same thing with football teams. You got to figure out why did, you know, to Pat's question, why didn't you do this, and why are you 4-8? You know, you got to figure out why. And so when you figure out why, you develop that list, and then you go out and you try to fill those needs based on how you handle it. And you try to work your way systematically through, and that's how the off season works. You know, it's easy to say, you know, we need to have a better wide receiver, but there may be a player on your team that was hurt. You know, so you go through that list, and once you build up your team needs, you start racking them down. And you know, and then as it relates to the salary cap, you can't pay everybody. You can't pay. You have 105 players, not everybody's going to get money. And if you have a performance-based system, then that's fair to the players. They know that if they perform, they're going to get paid.
Two more here in front right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to believe in this. We're all trying to learn the system. You know.
I'm not trying to act like I know more than you know. I know that.
But you have to assume, if this is not right, you say so, but more money is going to be paid to the portal guys, because they've been experienced guys in college and they've been very good, and so they have more of a resume. So I guess what I'm asking is there a budget that you use with the amount of money that you get from rev share that you're going to spend on freshmen, so you'll have enough left to be in the bidding, good place in the bidding world with transfers when they come?
Yeah, I mean, we're
And
going
the
to
other part of that is that how many freshmen want to talk about the revenue share, and you have to convince them that this is a good place to come, even if we don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I would say this to you: there's no freshman that's going to any school in this country who's not getting a rev share contract. That's just part of the landscape that you're in. There's an acquisition cost to freshmen, okay? You know, and it's a highly competitive environment out there. And anybody that tells you differently hasn't recruited against any of these teams. So there's an acquisition cost that's attached to it that's above and beyond what you value the player at. And so that's one way. And then you always are going to have money on your cap. But again, your cap, in terms of the portal guys, is related to your own team as well. And you've got to integrate that in. If I bring a player in at a certain position and pay him more than the player that's been really good at a position on our team, now I've got to make that adjustment. So I've got to answer, so if I make that decision, or we make it as a staff, then we've got to be prepared to have a player to go back to the player. So you got to have money. Now, you know, so you understand there is rev, and then there is the NIL Go, which is effective through corporate dollars. So part of this job is still fundraising. I mean, part of this job is still fundraising because, you know, the teams that you're competing against, the Clemsons, the Florida States, the Virginias, they're operating on a different level. Everybody has a different level of financial money, and you've got to be able to be competitive within that environment. You know, Texas A&M, the Southeast Conference schools, you know, everybody gets 20.5 million. How it gets divvied up is different, but everybody else is out fundraising through corporate dollars, which will then be allowed to go to the players.
Yeah, but the way we understand it is NIL isn't like it used to be. NIL is more controlled now. You can't give somebody $1 million because no athlete can be valued that amount of money. So I guess what I'm asking is,
it is controlled more. It is, you have to go through a process. And that's why I use the word corporate dollars. It has to come through corporations. And then you have access to get to them. I mean, some of the programs that we compete against have been set up for this for the last 3 years. They've worked at it. Now, we're like you. We've just learned the system, so we've kind of got into it, and we have to set up our program in the same manner.
are you saying that corporate dollars are fed into the NIL system? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying corporate dollars get fed into the NIL system, exactly.
And it's hard for us to understand that because they're making the NIL system very regulated in terms of
Regulated, it's regulated in this way. If a donor gives money to NIL, and you can't give that donor's money to the player because it's from a donor, but if it's from a corporation, say, you know, UNC Health gives money, then the player can work for UNC Health and represent them. It's a corporate deal. And so that's the difference.
Yeah, but now it's you have to know what that athlete is doing. Is it really the value? You can't. The first year we were around, people were getting $1 million. Athletes were getting $1 million, and
They're
schools,
still going to get $1 million.
And schools were saying, "Well, we'll worry about the NIL later." But the truth is, you can't. There's no way an athlete can be paid $1 million in NIL because he never has that value as a high school player or even transfer in college. He just never does. So,
I mean, I think if you would look at some of the quarterbacks in college football and how they're being paid, you might want to change your
well, there
thinking
might be
on
a few
that.
of them, but it's
Yeah.
like I'm just worried about. I'm an alum, so I'm just worried about it. When you get to the portal, will there be enough money to be competitive with the other schools for a player that you want?
Yeah, there will be enough money. The portal is going to be about, you know, the portal is like the NFL free agency. It's about what you want to spend and what you value the player.
Mike, can you tell us what we're on this on doing NIL?
Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry. When did you decide that you needed to get such a big class to come in here? And then you mentioned that, you know, coaches leaving at other places, notably Penn State, Virginia Tech, places like that. How did that play into, hey, those are really good players, we want to add to our club?
I think, you know, it's situational, right? So, you know, I mean, I think one of the kids we recruited had been down here before, had come to North Carolina before we were even here, and you know, and then when they made some changes at the other school, those kids started to look for other places to go play, and so we were able to kind of take advantage of that. And I think, you know, I think our mind shift was we didn't shift our mind, we're just, why should we stop collecting good players? You know, who wrote a rule that said you should only take 22 seniors? Like I didn't see that in the manual when I came here. You know, I mean, so I think Lane Kiffin said it in his press conference. He said at LSU, he wanted to go to LSU because they want to sign more high school kids. I think developing your own has always been the best way to build a team because you're building a foundation.
Last one here, Shelby, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just with this recruiting class, obviously you guys are more established. You have the entire staff set up. I know that was maybe an issue last year. We had kids coming, but hey, like I don't know who my cornerbacks coach is going to be, or just a
Good point. I mean, that was a huge problem for us last year because we got here and in free agency in the NFL, nobody, they want to know who their coach is, but they really want to know what's getting deposited. Whereas here in college, they want to know the coach and they want to know the deposit. So you're right.
Yeah, I guess how much has that helped. And the second part of my question, how are you guys just going about communicating any possible coach staffing changes that may occur?
Well, I mean, we haven't, we're focused on our team right now and evaluating that. So, but look, the coaches are huge, just like our scouts are huge, because they've been at places and they've been recruiting other players that went somewhere else. I mean, this isn't like if you lose a guy as a recruiting class, and we've lost players. You can't get mad and hang up your phone and never talk to them again because there's a transfer portal. So it could be coming back around again. So it's look, we lost a player, we move on. But so these coaches know a lot of guys that they've had out there that went to different schools that may be happy, may not be happy. And then you take that information and you take it and apply it and you watch the tape and move forward. So it's very helpful. It's very helpful. Look, we're in the information business. And when you've worked at different schools and different platforms, that information becomes really important.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.